Boker Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is dedicated for a Shmira for all of the Chayalim, Hatzalah for the Shvuyim, Yeshua for the Am Yisrael. And this Eis Tzara says the Gemara on the bottom of Kufiyut Beis and Beis, 2 lines from the bottom. Amar Ravina Yavinan Zimna Apume de Isasav Apume de Shivava, that a court that wants to appoint that wants to send a hazmanan, a summons to the court, can use a woman or a neighbor, meaning it doesn't have to be an official agent to the court, and therefore we can rely upon the fact that they're going to fulfill their responsibilities. And when do we say that the court can rely upon the woman or the neighbor to issue the summons? Well, I'm on el delay masa, only in a circumstance where the person who they're summoning is not in the town. And so therefore he says to his neighbors that when this person returns, the court says, say to the neighbors, when this guy comes back, tell him to come. But if on the top of 113a, but if this person they're summoning is in the city, well, we're not going to do that. Damrinan, because we say Amar, that the person will say Lo Amrule de Amri, because under these circumstances we say Damrinan Amar Lo Amrule, that maybe this person did not repeat the summons of the court. Maybe the woman or the neighbor did not say it because they said, oh, presumably since he's already in the town, it's not my job. The agent of the court, the official agent of the court, found him. And when do we say that you could rely upon the neighbor or the woman to issue the summons? Only where this person doesn't pass by the entrance to the court on his return to the city. But if he passes by the entrance to the court, we don't rely upon him to. Then we're going to say we can't rely upon the woman or the neighbor because because they'll say, oh, for sure the court found him and issued the summons, and therefore it's not their job. And we only say that you can rely upon the woman or the neighbor to issue the summons when he's expected back that same day. But if he's not expected back that same day, then we could say presumably they might forget and therefore they won't issue the summons. So Rava says this man that they wrote a summons, or they wrote an excommunication, a psicha, because he didn't come to the court. Well, until he actually shows up at the court, we're not going to tear up the summons. Although it's sayas ladina, but if they wrote the excommunication because he didn't listen to the court, until he starts to listen, we don't tear it up. Velohi, but that's not accurate. Even the Amar Tzaisina, actually, once he says, I'm going to listen, then Karana, we're going to rip it up immediately, because Rashi says maybe he doesn't have the money and now he's going to work hard to get the money. So that's the distinction. If he says he's going to do it, we tear it up. But that's only if, everything in these cases goes everything goes according to what the court can also determine if this person is being honest or not. Amar Rav Chisda, Kovim Zman Sheni Chamishi V'Sheni. We establish that we issue the summons, and then we say come on Monday, and then if he doesn't come, we give him another summons on Thursday. If he doesn't come on Monday, we give him another summons, and then if he doesn't come Thursday, we give him another summons for Monday. Until then, we write the summons. Basically, we write the excommunication the next day. Zimna basar zimna. We give him a time, and then time after the next time. Or machar kasvina. And the following day, we write the excommunication. Ravasi ikla be Rav Kahana. Ravasi came to the bezin of Rav Kahana. Chaza he isisa dizmanu adina bepanya, that he saw there was a woman who in the afternoon was issued a summons. And in the morning, Rav Safra was already writing the excommunication about her. So Rav Asi says to Rav Kahana, says to Rav Kahana, is this really appropriate? Don't you follow what Rav Chisda says that you give them Monday, Thursday, Monday? He says, yeah, when do we apply that? When he's a man who's asked to travel, he's not in the city. But a woman, it doesn't really mean just a woman. It means somebody who doesn't travel. Since he's in the city, and she didn't show up, this woman is clearly just basically ignoring the court. She's rebellious, and so therefore we're going to excommunicate her immediately. Amar Rav Yehuda, lo ya'ivna zimna, will be Yom Nisan, will be Yom Tishrei. Rav Yehuda says we don't issue the summons not in the months of Nisan or in the month of Tishrei. Will be Mali Yom Tavav, will be Mali Shabbasa, and we don't issue a summons on Erev Yontif, on the Eve of Yontif, or on the Eve of Shabbos. Why don't we issue the summons in Nisan? So Rashi says because this is the time of the harvesting. Zman Kotzir for Batzir. Rambam says that it's because you're involved with the holidays. You also don't issue it on Friday or on Erev Shabbos because there the concern is that you're going to be so busy you're going to forget that you got it. Yom Nisan lebasar Yom Nisan will be Yom Tishrei lebasar Tishrei, but you could send it in Nisan that they come after Nisan, or for Tishrei, you could send it for after Tishrei, Kavinan. That we do establish. But from one Friday to the next Friday, lo Kavinan. We don't send out the summons. My time up. He's clearly involved in preparing for Shabbos, and so therefore he might be preoccupied and forget about the summons. It says Rav Nachman, you don't issue a summons. The kalas where they gather to hear the drashos. You don't issue the summons when they come together, the drashos, before the weekly drashos or the ones before the holidays. And also coming to Rav Nachman, when they came to issue the summons, then you think we're gathering so you can go make it easier to issue your summons? And so therefore it's not appropriate. We want to have a safe space. But nowadays we have deceptive people. They use this as an opportunity to do their meetings because they think it's a safe zone, be free of being issued the summons. So now we are actually able to do it. That if the father steals something and leaves it for the children, if it's something that's achrayos, that there's usually, typically speaking, this means land, then they have to return it. But Masale Rebbe or Shimon Parei doesn't actually mean in this case just real estate. Doesn't mean actual real estate. Even a bull that he uses to plow or a donkey he uses to do donkey work, he has to return it. Why? Even though it's not land, because of the honor for their father, people will see, oh, that's the bull that the father stole. That's a donkey the father stole. And then their father's memory will be disrespected. So by Mine Rav Kahana mi Rav Mita Umesav ala Shulchan va'ochal. What if it's a bed and he wants to recline on it, or a table and he was eating on it, meaning to say his father stole a bed and now he left it inside your house, or a table and it's inside your house. So there you don't have to worry about other people seeing it. But is that going to be prohibited? Give the wise man and he'll become even more wise. Meaning to say that it's the same law. And you might have thought that people won't see it, but we say no, that you have to infer that it's prohibited because they're just like a cow. You have to return if it's a specific object people identify with the theft of his father. The offspring is obligated to return it. Now we come up to the very, very important Mishnah of stealing from somebody who steals from a non-Jew. You're not allowed to get change, exchange your money to get a lower, denominations of money, not from the box of the charity, or from the not from the tax collectors, or from the officials. We can't do that. And the reason is because Rashi says because these collectors of the taxes, they are that they're basically stealing the money from the people they're collecting it. And so therefore you're not allowed to take that money because you're exchanging it with them and you're benefiting from charity. And you're also not allowed to take charity from them because it's stolen. But if the person keeps the money in his house or in the marketplace, then it'll be okay. That would be okay because that's his private stash, and that's okay. That's not from the money that he's stealing. So, hold on. So, Tanav on no single dinar, no single asashar. But we did teach about this that let's say he has to give them a dinar, which is a larger denomination, but he doesn't really have to give them the dinar. He only has to give them half a dinar. So he's allowed to get change from them under those circumstances, because otherwise he's just giving them more money. So it's like he's saving it from their hands. So the Gemara says, why is a tax collector considered a thief? This is the fundamental principle Shmuel teaches, and nobody argues with it throughout the Shas, that the law of the land is the law. Dina de machusa dina. So they're allowed to collect taxes. So Amar Rav Chinna bar Kahana, Amar Shmuel, we're talking about basically the tax collector who's deviating from the instructions of the king. We're talking about the moches she'en kitzva. A tax collector has no specific amount, and so now he's just collecting for himself. He's just getting his own money. Or we're talking about that basically he's self-appointed. The king didn't appoint him to collect it. Some taught this teaching of Shmuel on the following. Well, this teaching of Debei Rabbi Yanai and Rav Chanina bar Kahana, in the name of Shmuel. So they taught it about the following. It says, if a person they didn't charge tax for the garments that you wore, a person's not allowed to wear, if it's kulayim, he's not allowed to wear it himself, even though it's on top of 10 garments, so he's clearly not getting any benefit from it, but you're still not allowed to do this. And why would you because of kulayim, but why would you anyways want to do it to try to evade the taxes by wearing it and not something, it's something that you're wearing that you're not taxed on. The Gemara says, but Rabbi Shimon says, Mishum Rabbi Akiva mutar lavriach hasamechas. You're allowed to. Masnisin to look Rabbi Akiva. This brisa is not like Rabbi Akiva. The Tanya also lavriach hasamechas. The brisa, because the initial statement was under the assumption that otherwise to evade the taxes you're allowed to do, but the brisa is not like the Rabbi Akiva, because if a brisa says you're not allowed to evade the taxes, Rabbi Shimon says, Mishum Rabbi Akiva mutar lavriach hasamechas. He says you're allowed to evade the taxes. With respect to Klayim, what's their argument? With respect to Klayim, we could say that what's their argument? That one is saying that since it's not your intent to wear wool and linen, you're just trying to evade the taxes, it's permitted. And the other one says that if it's, even though it's not your intent, Klayim is prohibited. But to evade the taxes, how is it ever possible to evade the taxes? Isn't the law of the land the law? Now we're talking about a self-appointed tax collector has no limits. Or the Bay Rabbi Yana says, talking about a tax collector who is standing on his own. And some say it about the following. Some say this teaching was taught about the following. It says, Nordrin, Lahargin or Haramin or Mohsin. Now, let's say a person's coming who's a murderer, or he's a strongman, or is a tax collector. You could take a vow that the property is Shehishal Truma, that belongs to the Kohen, so therefore they're not going to touch it, or Shehishal Beis HaMelech, or that it belongs to the king, so they're not going to touch it. And even though it's not, even Alpha Pisha Enishal Truma, Alpha Pisha Enishal Melech, you could take basically false oath under these circumstances, a false vow. Not exactly an oath, but a vow. So how are you able to do this? Basically, basically, you're not exactly taking the vow. It's a whole question how you're able to do this, but that under those circumstances, they allow you to basically try to evade by claiming this. Hold on one second. So Tosfos explains in the Dharm that they were lenient on him because uh, since he's being forced, so therefore he took this vow, and then he can just, I guess, annul the vow afterwards. So, but how is he able to do it? Why can he evade the taxes? Well, Mochsin, V'amar Shmuel, Dina Malchus Adina. So isn't the law of the land the land? Amar Chanina Barkana, Amar Shmuel, B'mochas Shem Al Kitzvat, They Rabbi Yanai says B'mochas Omei Law. Again, we're talking about this tax collector who's not obeying the law. Rav Ashi Amar B'mochas Kinani. Rav Ashi says, okay, we're talking about a tax collector as a Kanani. Now, wherever it says Kanani, it really means the censors added this in because it's obviously a highly charged political text. So they changed it from a regular non-Jew from a regular non-Jew to a Canaanite to try to evade the censors. But Rav Ashi explains that what we're talking about here is that the tax collector was a Canaanite. He was not Jewish, and he acquired from the king the right to tax the Jews. And even though we say the law of the land is the land, nevertheless, you're stealing from the non-Jew. And so, and you can't leave now, by the way, before the end of the daf because it's going to limit this completely. But therefore, since it's stealing it from the non-Jew, that will be permitted if he doesn't know what you're doing. So that's why you're allowed to make this lie to him. Tanya Yisrael Kanani on us, or if there's a Israel and a Kanani on us here too, it means really basically a dishonest person who's Shaboadin. So the Jew has the court case with the dishonest non-Jew, Shaboadin. If you could defeat him by the laws of the Jews, defeat him. This is our law. Let's say you could defeat him by the laws of the Canaanites. Zakeo, defeat him. This is your law. But if you can't do that, then you have to come and use chachma, use wisdom or claims until you get out of it. That's the position of Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Kiva says, "Ein bano avakifin kiddush Hashem." Rabbi Kiva says, "No, you can't use this wisdom because of kiddush Hashem." Meaning to say, you have to sanctify Hashem's name, and if somehow they're going to find out that you're not acting honestly, you're going to desecrate God's name. Rabbi Kiva, time of the Ika Kiddush Hashem, Rabbi Kiva is saying the only reason we have to be honest is because otherwise you're not sanctifying Hashem's name. Aleika Kiddush Hashem, Bain, but meaning without Kiddush Hashem, you'd be allowed to do it. V'gezel Kanani Mishari, how are you allowed to steal from the non-Jew? V'atanya Rabbi Shimon Davar Zadar Rabbi Akiva. Kishabam is Zephirim. Rabbi Akiva himself expounded when it came from Zephirim. Minayla Gezel Kanani Shawas. Or how do we know that you're not allowed to steal from a non-Jew? Tamomer Achreinim Kargula TLO. After it says about Eved, a Jew who was sold to a non-Jew, that after he's sold, you should redeem him. And what does that mean? On the top of Kuf, you give him a base. Shaloyim Shechenu, the that you can't just take him away. You have to redeem him. Yachol Yigul Malav. I might think that you should allow the Canaanite to charge you extra. Tamor Rochishim Im Konel. You have to be exact. You have to be exact, but you can't steal. So Rav Yosef Okasha, but Kanani Abaker Toshav. No. By a regular non-Jew, you could, but not by a ger tosha. So but they both written next to each other. So clearly the pasuk is talking about both a ger and a ger, both by a goy and a ger toshav. So if that's the case, what are we talking about here? So it says Rava Elam Rava. What's the contradiction between Rabbi Akiva? One case he says you can't steal from non-Jew. One says he can. It says when it comes to actually stealing, you know how to steal from the non-Jew. But when it comes to evading your loan, maybe that you'd be allowed to do. Evading the money you owe him, that maybe you're allowed to do. But Eved Ivri, of course, also. But Hebrew slave, that's also just evading the loan because he owes him the money, because he has to work for him. So So therefore, Rabba Otame, no, Rabba says the Amar. Rabba says Evid every Kufa Konai. No, he really owns the Jew as a slave, and so therefore, it's really just it's stealing from him. It's not. It's not just not paying back the loan. Amar Bibi Bargido, Amar Bishim Chasida, Gezel Kanani Asar. He says, you're not allowed to steal from the non-Jew, but Avedas or Muteris. But if he has a lost object, that you'd be permitted to not return. Gezel Asar, the stolen object is prohibited. Damar Afuna Minaila Gezel Kanani Shuasar. How do we know that stealing from a Canaanite is prohibited? As states, V'achalta Esko Amim Asher Hashem Alkecha Nosein V'achalta Esko Amim Asher Hashem Alkecha Nosein Lach. That you shall, meaning to say, Bisman Shem Misurim B'yadcha, that when can you steal from them? When they're in your possession. V'lo Bisman Shem Misurim B'yadach. But not if they're not in your possession. Not if they're not under your subjugation. Avedas umitaris. When are the lost objects permitted? The Amar Rav Chama Bar Goria Amar Rav Minayla Avedas Akanani. How do we know that the lost object of a Canaanite is permitted for you to take? Shem Mutaris. Shenemar Kol Avedas Achicha. You have to return all the lost objects to your brother. Achicha Tamachzir Via Tamachzir Lekanani. But you cannot return but you don't have to return the Canaanites. The Gemara says, maybe it's only where that you don't have in your possession yet. Maybe there you're not obligated to return it. To look after it, but where it's in your hand, but where it would be in your hand, maybe only then you'd have to return it. So the Gemara says, no, even where it's in your hand, you have to return it, where you have to return to him. But all of this, everything we've set up until now, is wiped away by the next line of the Gemara, and that's a dispositive teaching, and the teaching is very, very clear. Tanya Reb Pinchas ben Yair Omer b'makom sheishlo Hashem afilu avedaso asur. Reb Pinchas ben Yair says if there is a desecration of God's name, then even the lost object is prohibited to keep. And what the concept here is that when it comes to desecrating Hashem's name, or we have the inverse, sanctifying Hashem's name, that we have to can't take any chances, and we have to go absolutely meticulous and act absolutely honestly. And this is actually really, when we think about it, the laws of stealing from a non-Jew are actually stricter than the laws of stealing from a Jew, because by a non-Jew, even if it will be technically permitted to take because it's not theft, we have another principle, and that is that we have to sanctify Hashem's name, and that doesn't apply to the same degree with the Jew. So we have to be even more honest and more appropriate and more generous in the dealings with the non-Jews and with the Jews. So Amar Shmuel Ta'uso Muteris. So Shmuel says, if he makes a mistake, then it'll be permitted to keep it. Shmuel, what did Shmuel do? Zaba Mikuti Lakana Dadahava. What did Shmuel do? He purchased from a guy a basin of gold, the Mara de Parzlah, on the presumption that it was copper, because the non-Jews thought that it was copper, and he wanted to sell it to him ba'ar bazuzi. So he wanted to purchase it. He wanted to sell it to him for 4 zuz, which is what a copper basin cost. But he gave him another. Meaning to say, he bought it for 4, and he only gave him 3. That Shmuel purchased from him the gold one. So basically, we're saying here that Shmuel is saying it's permitted to trick him because he got the gold one instead of the copper, and he only paid 3 instead of 4. But the Gemara says, Reb Kahana Zaba Mikuti Meya V'Eshem Chavita B'Meya. Reb Kahana purchased from the guy 120 barrels instead of 100. And it also cost him another zuz. But he said to him, look, I'm relying upon you. It's your mistake. Ravina Zavin Dikla Hu V'Kuti. Ravina purchased a palm tree with a kuti. And they're going to cut it down, and each one is going to take the branches. Go quickly take the branches. The kusi minyana yadav. It means the kusi only counts the numbers, but he doesn't count by the thickness, so we could get the thicker branches. It's not exactly stealing, it's just getting the better part of the partnership. Ravashi was walking along the road. He saw palm trees, the branches of the grapevine in the orchard. And he found these clusters of grapes. He says, go see if they're from the Kuti, bring them. If they're from the Jew, don't bring them. So Shama Kusi Dava Yosef Pardisa. So Kusi heard this. He said, Amrway, the Kusi sure you're allowed to steal from me because I'm a Kusi who had to take my grapes from the orchard. Amrway, no, just the opposite. Kusi Shakil the May. No, if it's a Kusi, I don't. If he's saying, I'm telling you, just bring them if they're a Kusi, because then I could pay for them. But Yisrael will Shakil the May. The Jews who aren't going to want to take my money, and I don't want to take it without paying. So it's just the opposite. Only take it if it's a Kusi so that I can pay him. Gufa Amar Shmuel Dina de Machutza Dina. Shmuel says the law of the land is the law. Amarava Teda, I'll prove it to you. Dikatle Dikli, because what do? When the kingdom, they cut down palm branches, Vigashre Gisher, and they build a bridge, when everybody passes on them. And how can you do that? You're benefiting from stolen property. So it's clear that they had the right to take them. Maybe it's the only reason why they're able to go in it is because the people from whom they took the branches gave up hope. It wouldn't matter if they didn't, if it wasn't the law of the land, their yish by itself wouldn't help, because it was yish by itself doesn't work, because we also have to have what's called shinoi rishus, and since it's in public, it's not changing ownership. Gemara says, but those people who took the palm trees, they didn't do like the king said. The Malka Amar Zilu v'kitlu mikobagi. The king said, go take from. Yes?
Well, don't hang up. Ima wants to say something to you at the end.
Okay, fine. I won't hang up. Okay, so he says, because Malka Amar Zilu katlu mikobagi, go take it from every valley. The Inu also the Katul Michad Baga. And these guys went and they took it from just one valley. So he says, yeah, Shluchot de Malka Kamalka Votach. He says, of course, the agents of the king are basically, they're acting like the king, and they're acting in they're not acting exact. Inu Hafsidun and Naishu, and these people who lost their palm branches, they did the loss upon themselves, because they should have gone the Bailu the Inka Mikui Bagi. They should have gone around to the other places and collected their money. Amarava manded the shtakech the dari para manta de malka. So he says somebody who has his share in the granary. Let's say the agent of the king comes to collect the taxes from the crops that the earth produced, and he came to a field of partners, and part of the partners took their portion. So somebody who didn't take, he's going to take his portion from the granary. So so that's the law of the king, that the rest of the partners can take what was paid on their behalf, and they can go collect it. That's only by partners. But the sharecropper, no, he's not losing anything. Arisa, who to come up with, he doesn't have to pay because he has no share in the fields, and so therefore they don't have the right to collect from him, and so therefore if you take it from him, it's theft. That the tax collector of the king can go and collect a pawn from one person in the city on behalf of the other person, even though he already paid his debt, because that's the law of the king. That's from that year's crops. And that year's head tax. But from last year's, you can't do it. Those animals, those people that put their animals in the field to collect their manure, and they let them graze, if it will be within the city, also you can't take an animal from them. My time because they mix up the animals together. But outside the border, outside the city, you can take it from them. Amar Ravina, because then it's not the Jewish animals. If the owners are running after them and saying that's mine, then then even outside the city it's prohibited, because we say it's the Jewish animals. Okay.